Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalee Holloway. 18-year-old Natalee Holloway, who disappeared while on a trip to Aruba, an island in the southern Caribbean Sea near Venezuela. In May 2005, a group of 124 students from Mountain Brook High School, accompanied by 7 chaperones, traveled to Aruba to celebrate the start of their adult lives. The students stayed at the Holiday Inn and had access to beaches, palm trees, restaurants, and local entertainment venues. They spent 5 unforgettable days on the island, enjoying themselves with swimming, sunbathing, dancing, and partying. However, on the day of their return, Natalee Holloway was nowhere to be found. Her belongings, phone, and passport were still in the hotel, but she had vanished. Her mother, Elizabeth Twitty, was the first to raise the alarm and reported her concerns to one of the chaperones. Elizabeth recalled that at that moment, her heart sensed something was wrong, as her daughter was obedient and always stayed in touch. Natalee's mother and stepfather immediately flew to Aruba to search for her. Upon arriving, Elizabeth was able to find out more information than the police did, as the authorities seemed uninterested in starting a search. The police told Elizabeth that cases like this are not rare, and that people often miss their planes or get lost in bars or with new acquaintances. However, Elizabeth knew her daughter and was convinced that something was seriously wrong. Natalee Holloway was last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's nightclub with 17-year-old Jan, a local regular, who had offered her a drink. They left with 2 other young men in a silver Honda car. 4 hours later, Natalee's mother, Elizabeth, contacted the police again with concerning information, leading to the detention of the trio. Initially, Van der Slot denied knowing Natalee, but later admitted to leaving the bar with her. They drove around, visited the beach, and then dropped her off near the hotel. His friends, Deepak and SES Kalpo, confirmed his account. Natalee was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth Ann and David Edward Holloway. Her parents loved each other dearly, but divorced after 13 years. Natalee and her brother stayed with their mother, but their father remained supportive emotionally and financially. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, and Natalee moved to Mountain Brook. The move was smooth, and she made new friends easily due to her sociable nature. Her family was devout, attending church every Sunday, which influenced Natalee's upbringing. Relatives remembered her as kind, modest, and beautiful, with a radiant smile. Natalee was an excellent student, engaged in dance, and participated in various clubs. She dreamed of pursuing a career in medicine and had chosen a local university for a substantial scholarship. At the time, she had promising life prospects and was excited about an upcoming trip. Elizabeth believed her daughter was unlikely to trust a stranger or get into a car with him. Surveillance footage from the bar confirmed her suspicions, showing Natalee's behavior changed after drinking a beverage offered by Jan, suggesting she was under the influence of some substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie spoke well of Natalee, but Van der Slot had a questionable reputation, often behaving poorly, indulging in gambling, and consuming forbidden substances. He had previously recorded and uploaded videos of his exploits to the internet, but was never held accountable due to his father's influence as a well-known lawyer aiming for a judgeship. The disappearance of Natalee sparked a nationwide search, with the island authorities launching an extensive operation to find her. Volunteers, divers, and specially trained dogs were deployed to cover a vast area. The government even declared a public holiday, and 50 Marines combed the coastline. An airplane equipped with thermal imaging scanned over 40 kilometers of terrain, but Natalee seemed to have vanished into thin air. On June 30th, investigators discovered that there was no footage of Natalee entering a building, which contradicted the statements of Jan and the Kalpo brothers. The police brought them in for questioning again, and this time, the younger Van der Slot unexpectedly changed his story. He claimed to have dropped Natalee off at a location without surveillance, not near the hotel, and added that he saw a figure in black moving towards her. Hotel security staff who were on duty that night were detained, with investigators suspecting they might have intercepted Natalie on her way. On June 9th, detectives arrested the suspicious trio, and one of the security guards shared a cell with the Calpo brothers. The guard learned a crucial detail. Sadish confessed that he and Deepak had lied to cover for their friend, leaving Jan alone with Natalie on the beach. The security guards were released on June 13th, and on June 17th, another suspect, Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ, was detained. The police suspected his involvement in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot was brought in for questioning and detained, but he was released on June 26th due to insufficient evidence. Jan offered a third explanation of the events, trying to shift the blame onto the Calpo brothers, claiming he parted ways with Natalie near his home, and she left with them. However, his story was not taken seriously. A lawyer defended Sadish and Deepak, and on July 4th, after a brief trial, the Calpo brothers were released. Jan van der Sloot, born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, was one of 3 brothers in a large family. He was a good student, excelled in sports, and planned to attend St. Leo University in Florida. Jan's childhood was marked by a strained relationship with his mother, Anita, an art teacher, who considered him an incubator liar. He grew up rebellious, often ran away from home, and fell in with a bad crowd, developing a penchant for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as cool and fearless to his friends. Locals were suspicious of Jan's lenient attitude, fearing it would lead to trouble. However, he was popular among girls and often took advantage of them. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie persisted. U.S. authorities closely monitored the progress and provided substantial financial support. Despite the scrutiny, the Holloway family was desperate to find their daughter alive and announced a monetary reward, which initially started at $50,000. As hope dwindled, the reward increased to $1 million. Additionally, $100,000 was offered for information leading to the location of her remains, which later increased to $250,000. During this time, the investigation hit several dead ends. However, after the reward announcement, new witnesses emerged. One claimed to have seen Jan with the Calpo brothers at a local night spot between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Another witness claimed to have seen several suspicious men hiding a woman's body at a dump on the afternoon of May 30th. However, these statements led the investigation astray, and after numerous checks, their claims were not corroborated. On August 26th, the police detained the Calpo brothers and another young man, but these actions were unrelated to the case. The arrest was more about intimidation and an attempt to get them to talk. Ultimately, on September 3, 2005, all 4 were released on bail. A week and a half later, the court removed all restrictions and prohibitions, as none provided any substantial leads to the investigation. Jan van der Sloot was detained for 3 months, but after his release, he sought to capitalize on his notoriety by giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. In these appearances, he claimed that Natalee Holloway had flirted with him and offered to have sex. But he declined because he didn't have a condom. However, during one show, he became aggressive and threw a glass at the interviewer. A journalist who was targeted by Jan's glass-throwing incident held a grudge against him and worked with authorities to place a bug in a friend's car. The bug captured Jan confessing to witnessing Natalie's death. He claimed that they had sex on the beach, but afterward, she began shaking, lost consciousness, and eventually died. Jan and a friend then disposed of her body at sea. Despite this confession, Jan managed to avoid consequences by denying the statement on another TV show, claiming he had only told his friend what he wanted to hear. In 2007, Jan released a book, The Case of Natalee Holloway, my own account of her disappearance in Aruba, in which he presented his side of the story and apologized to Natalie's family. By this time, the official investigation had largely stalled. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward. The first reported seeing Jan and his father on the beach around 4 a.m. on the night Natalie went missing. The younger van der Sloot appeared disheveled, and the witness saw him arguing with his father in a car before they drove away. However, Paulus van der Sloot had an alibi for the night in question. The second witness was Jan's former girlfriend, who recalled that Jan had once made a suspicious comment about being able to dispose of someone's body. However, this was not considered a strong lead, given Jan's history of lying and exaggeration. Jan and the Calpo brothers were detained multiple times, but released due to lack of evidence. The Holloway family hired a private investigator who, along with Natalie's father, conducted their own investigation, interviewing locals and searching the landfill. During this time, they uncovered several oversights by the local police, including failure to interview Natalie's classmates or hotel room neighbors. It was also discovered that someone had used Natalie's hotel key several times on the night of her disappearance, and that her mobile phone and toothbrush had been left behind. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation ultimately revealed that the Aruban authorities had been negligent in their handling of the case. Jan's father, Paulus, died of a heart attack in 2010, reportedly due to the stress and shame of his son's actions. After his father's death, Jan attempted to blackmail the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth for $250,000. The family agreed to meet with him and paid an advance of $25,000. During the meeting, Jan provided yet another version of events, claiming that Natalie had resisted his advances, which enraged him, and that he had pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. He then buried her body in a building foundation. However, the police investigation revealed that Jan's claims were false, as the house he pointed to had long been built, and its foundation was fully set at the time of Natalie's disappearance. Jan fled to Peru with the money, but unfortunately, the consequences did not catch up with him immediately. On June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez was discovered in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had been severely beaten, and the cause of her death was determined to be a neck fracture. Surveillance cameras quickly helped identify the criminal, and soon after, Jan was arrested and taken to the police station. He explained that he had met Stephanie at a casino, and after playing poker, they decided to continue their acquaintance in his hotel room. However, when Stephanie accessed his laptop and discovered his connection to Natalee Holloway's death, she became frightened and wanted to leave. Jan realized what had alarmed her, became enraged, and struck her until she died. Jan was captured on his way to Chile and confessed to the crime on the 4th day of his arrest. The news shocked residents in the US, especially as it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty expressed her grief, noting that justice had finally been served, albeit at the cost of another life. Jan was sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 11, 2012, for the premeditated crime against Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in compensation to the Ramirez family. In 2014, Jan was transferred from Pedras Gordas prison to Chalet Pala prison, where he met a Peruvian woman who visited another inmate in 2010. They got married, but it turned out Jan was using her for his own purposes. He showed no signs of remorse or guilt for his actions. Meanwhile, in June 2011, David Holloway filed a petition in an Alabama court to have his daughter Natalie, who had gone missing in 2005, declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this, hoping that Jan would confess to the crime and face trial. After a hearing, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration on January 12, 2012. On June 8, 2023, Jan was extradited to the United States and placed in Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he pleaded not guilty. However, on October 18, 2023, he entered a plea agreement admitting to murdering Natalee Holloway. He confessed to fatally bludgeoning her with a cinder block on May 30th, 2005, and disposing of her body in the ocean for sharks to consume. Unfortunately, the confession made as part of the plea deal could not be used in court. Jan was sentenced to 20 years, which would run concurrently with his prison term in Peru. Natalee Holloway's disappearance remains one of the most notorious missing person cases in the US, and it is still an open case in Aruba. A series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays effectively allowed the murder of an innocent young woman to go unpunished, despite global attention to the investigation. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Savannah Gold. In 2017, Sherry's world was turned upside down in Florida when her daughter Savannah failed to show up for work at the restaurant where she was employed. Sherry was unaware that this ordinary day would be the last time she'd see Savannah. An hour later, the restaurant called Sherry to inform her that Savannah hadn't arrived for her shift, which was unusual since she had never missed work before. However, the events that unfolded after that call were even more bizarre. When Savannah's father received a message on her behalf, riddled with spelling mistakes and lacking punctuation, he instantly knew it wasn't his 21-year-old daughter who had written it. The impersonator claimed Savannah had met an amazing guy, fallen in love, and decided to elope with him, promising to call later. Savannah's father, Daniel Gold, carefully read the text message, paying close attention to its content. He knew his daughter well and was convinced that running away with her boyfriend was out of character for her. While Daniel studied his phone screen, trying to make sense of the message, Savannah's older brother Chris received a similar text saying she was leaving with her boyfriend and that she was okay. Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong, so he immediately started calling his daughter's phone, only to find it turned off. Savannah Page Gold was born on April 26, 1996, to Daniel and Sherry Gold. She lived with her parents and older brother Chris in Jacksonville, Florida. Savannah enjoyed various hobbies, including playing lacrosse, drawing, and dancing. Those close to her believed she embodied her last name, being a loving, kind, and caring person always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Savannah turned down a college scholarship for art and design to care for her mother, Sherry, who had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. To support her mother, Savannah took on household responsibilities and also worked as a waiter at Bonefish Grill, a restaurant. By the summer of 2017, she had been working at the restaurant for 2 years. On August 2nd, Savannah left for work at around 5 p.m., wearing her uniform, as her shift was scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. However, less than an hour later, Sherry received a call from the restaurant asking why Savannah had not shown up for work. This surprised Sherry, as she knew her daughter was responsible and had seen her leave the house in her uniform, indicating that she had indeed gone to work. After Savannah's father received a suspicious phone call, her father and brother started getting strange messages that they didn't think were from her. They suspected someone was impersonating Savannah. Before this, Savannah's father had tried to contact the police, but he couldn't reach his daughter. She was reported missing, and the police launched a search for her. Since sending those messages, Savannah's phone and social media accounts have been inactive. The police first went to the establishment where she worked to investigate. They found her unlocked car in the parking lot, about 120 yards from the restaurant entrance. Her personal documents, wallet, cards, cash, and other valuable items were still inside the car. It was clear to the police that the story about Savannah running away with her lover was a lie. If Savannah had planned to disappear, she would have taken her documents and bank cards with her to avoid being traced. It didn't make sense that she would leave them behind in her car. Initially, there were no signs of a struggle or crime near or inside the car, except for the flat left front tire. Forensic experts were called to investigate, and detectives visited the restaurant to speak with Savannah's co-workers. However, they all claimed that Savannah hadn't come to work that day and that no one had seen her. The presence of Savannah's car, parked 120 yards from the restaurant, led detectives to suspect that something might have happened to her after she arrived at work. They began canvassing local establishments, particularly those with surveillance cameras, to review the footage and identify the moment Savannah parked her car. Although the image quality was poor, the police were able to see from the footage that Savannah parked her car, got out, and walked to a nearby silver Chevrolet Malibu sedan. For 14 minutes, she stood next to the driver's door, talking to the person behind the wheel. She then opened the back door and got in, and the driver followed suit. The police watched as the car shook, and the back doors swung open 3 times before being closed again. Officers suspected that a fight had broken out inside the car between Savannah and the Chevrolet's owner. Shortly after, the man exited the car, approached Savannah's vehicle, opened the driver's door, and removed something from inside. He then punctured the front left tire, got back into his vehicle, and drove away without Savannah ever getting out. The owner of the Chevrolet Malibu was quickly identified as Lee Rodarte, a 28-year-old manager and chef at the restaurant where Savannah worked. He had helped distribute flyers with Savannah's picture during the police investigation and claimed not to have seen her for about 3 weeks, citing their different work shifts. However, when detectives re-interviewed restaurant employees, they discovered that Lee and Savannah's relationship went beyond a professional one. Several people came forward to reveal that the two had met secretly after hours and were romantically involved, a fact that Lee had failed to disclose to the police. On August 5th, during his work shift, Rodarte was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. When he arrived, he immediately warned the detectives that he struggled with reading and writing. In response, they thoroughly explained his rights, including his right to an attorney and the fact that anything he said could be used against him in court. Rodarte then admitted that he had previously lied to the police when they interviewed the restaurant staff, saying he hadn't seen Savannah in a long time. In reality, he had seen her on the day she went missing, but he was afraid that if he told the truth, he would become a suspect in her disappearance, which is why he had lied. Lee said he had met Savannah about 2 years ago when she started working at the restaurant. However, their socializing outside of work began around 8 months ago. At that time, he was already in a relationship with someone named Chelsea. When Chelsea discovered he had been unfaithful to her, she ended their relationship. Rodarte claims he dated Savannah for 3 months before she started using illegal drugs, which led him to end their relationship and reunite with Chelsea. Following the breakup, Rodarte and Savannah allegedly agreed to maintain a professional relationship limited to their work at the restaurant, as per company policy prohibiting romantic relationships among employees. Rodarte also states that Savannah had disclosed their intimate relationship to other waiters, with the intention of getting him fired. Lee last saw Savannah on a Wednesday afternoon. He drove to the mall on August 2nd to talk to her and persuade her not to spread rumors about their relationship, as he feared losing his job at the restaurant where he had worked for 5 years. When he met her, Savannah had just taken a strong substance and was panicking, so she asked if she could sit in his car for a bit. Once inside, Lee demanded that she stop telling people they were still dating. Savannah asked him to join her in the back seat so they could talk. After moving to the back seat, Lee again asked Savannah to stop spreading rumors, but she refused, saying she would do as she pleased. This response infuriated Lee, who then got out, slashed a tire on Savannah's car, and returned. When Savannah asked why he had done it, Lee admitted he was upset and angry. Next, as Rodarte claimed, Savannah exited his vehicle and headed towards the mall entrance, but didn't reach it. Instead, she got into an old green Ford pickup truck with tinted windows. At this point, she was holding her phone. However, Detectives were aware that Savannah never left Rodate's car and that he was lying. Unbeknownst to Rodate, the police had surveillance footage that disproved his claim, showing no Ford pickup truck and Savannah remaining in his car. When asked about subsequent events, Lee stated that he drove home, even detailing the streets he took. Notably, the man had scratches on his arms and neck, which he attributed to a workplace injury when questioned about their origin. When detectives directly asked Rodate about Savannah's whereabouts, he claimed to have no knowledge. The detectives adjusted their questioning strategy. At first, they listened attentively to his stories, showing interest, but soon they applied gentle pressure. They informed him straightforwardly that evidence contradicted his claim that Savannah had exited his car. After a brief time, Rodate altered his statement, asserting that he and Savannah had gone to his residence, and then she departed. The detectives remained skeptical and urged him to reveal the entire truth, considering Savannah's family's well-being. Rodate ultimately admitted to fatally snapping Savannah's neck during a backseat argument in his vehicle. Following their departure from the parking lot, he sent messages to Savannah's father and brother from her phone before discarding it out the window. Rodate returned the body to his property, intending to dispose of it by fire, but he soon discovered it wasn't as simple as he thought. Instead, he dug a hole and buried the body, only to later exhume it, wrap it in a blanket, and drive approximately 8 miles from the restaurant to a nearby pond, where he discarded the body. Although the autopsy couldn't determine the exact cause of Savannah's death, the examination revealed that her neck wasn't broken, as Rodate had claimed, and no illegal substances were found in her body. However, forensic experts discovered that the thyroid cartilage in Savannah's throat was fractured, suggesting strangulation, and roughly 75% of her body exhibited fire damage. Despite confessing to the crimes, Rodate maintained his not guilty plea on charges of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a dead body. The autopsy revealed that the condition of Savannah's body was too compromised to determine an exact cause of death. Contrary to Rodate's claims, her neck was not broken, and no illegal substances were found in her system. However, the autopsy did indicate that Savannah was strangled, as her thyroid cartilage was broken and approximately 75% of her body had been burned. Rodate's confession was revoked at trial, where he claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Savannah had initiated the strangulation. This reversal put Savannah's family through additional trauma, forcing them to attend numerous court hearings. Cher Gold, Savannah's mother, has battled recurring cancer during this ordeal, but she remains committed to attending every hearing alongside her family. They have been present at 26 out of 27 hearings, enduring the emotional toll of facing Rodate, the man responsible for their daughter's death. The family's primary concern now is to bring this painful process to a close and secure justice for Savannah. Lee Rodate was not the only family member to be charged with murder. In 2016, a year before Lee committed his crime, his sister Amber Camarillo, then 26 and still known by her maiden name Rodate, shot and killed a woman during a dispute over a car. She received a 20-year prison sentence. Lee Rodate was offered a plea deal, which required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence. In return, the charges of tampering with physical evidence and abuse of the body would be dropped. After consulting with his attorneys, Rodate accepted the deal and was sentenced to 40 years in prison on March 11, 2021. Following the verdict, Savannah's family expressed gratitude to everyone for their support. Daniel Gold stated that they loved Savannah and were overwhelmed to discover how many others also cared for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jolene Cummings. The disappearance of 33-year-old Jolene Cummings shocked even seasoned detectives. Jolene, a mother of 3, lived in Fernandina Beach and was going through a divorce from her husband Jason. While Jolene and their children resided in a Fernandina Beach house, Jason moved to a neighboring city and had weekend visitations with the kids. Jolene worked as a hairdresser at Tangle's hair salon. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, Jolene worked until 5 p.m. The next day, Mother's Day, was also her 34th birthday. Her children had spent the previous days with their father. As agreed, Jolene was to meet Jason on Sunday in Hilliard at the Winn-Dixie supermarket parking lot to pick up the children. Jason brought the kids, but Jolene failed to appear. All attempts to reach her by phone were unsuccessful. Her mother, Ann Johnson, who wanted to wish Jolene a happy birthday, couldn't contact her either, as all calls went straight to voicemail. After trying to reach Jolene to no avail, Jason contacted Ann to inquire about the children. Upon learning that Jolene hadn't picked up the kids, Ann grew concerned, as this behavior was unusual for her daughter. When Ann couldn't get in touch with Jolene on Monday, May 14th, she filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities promptly launched an investigation, releasing a poster with Jolene's photo and issuing an all-points bulletin for her 2006 Ford Expedition. Ann Johnson made a public plea for help in finding her daughter, urging anyone with information to come forward. Jolene's disappearance was devastating for Ann, and she begged anyone with knowledge to report it. On the same day, police and volunteers searched the forest near Jolene's home, but their efforts were unsuccessful. The salon where Jolene worked was closed on Sunday and Monday. The police discovered that Jolene was last seen on Saturday, May 12th, when she left work. According to the salon's owner, Jolene and Jennifer, another hairdresser, were scheduled to work together that day. In a phone call, Jennifer told her boss that she and Jolene closed the salon at 5 p.m. and each drove away in their own cars. The police determined that Jolene last used her phone to make an outgoing call while still at work on May 12th. Nassau County Sheriff Bill Leeper appealed to anyone who was a customer of Tangle's salon or in the area on May 12th to contact the police. Jolene's relatives and friends didn't think she was hiding on her own accord. The owner of the salon, where Jolene had worked for 6 years, shared their skepticism. It was hard for them to believe that she would abandon her children. The police were determined to uncover at least one lead, so they delved into Jolene's personal life. As spouses often become hostile during divorce and child custody disputes, they took a closer look at Jason. Meanwhile, detectives found that just 5 days before Jolene vanished, a neighbor had reported a loud argument to the police. It emerged that Jolene had been fighting with her ex-boyfriend, Jason G., and their children were witnesses to the altercation. He had asked Jolene if he could stay with her for a while, but she refused. Enraged, he began vandalizing everything in sight. The reason for her refusal was that the police were actively searching for Jason due to his parole violations. By the time the police arrived, Jason had managed to flee the scene. After Jolene disappeared, Jason G. became a person of interest in the police investigation. 2 days into the investigation, on May 15, 2018, the police found Jason G. hiding in Jolene's house, where he had been since the day Jolene's neighbor reported a loud quarrel to the police. He was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. During the conversation, Jason G. claimed he was not involved in Jolene's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police discovered their first crucial lead. They found Jolene Cummings's SUV parked outside a Home Depot hardware store, just a few miles from her workplace. The vehicle was undamaged and showed no signs of a struggle. On May 15th, the police visited the salon where Jolene worked, as it was the first working day after a 2-day break. They arrived at 10 a.m. to speak with Jennifer Seibert, an employee who claimed to be the last person to see Jolene and to have closed the salon with her before the weekend. However, Jennifer failed to show up for work, citing an urgent matter in another city. CCTV footage provided crucial clues about Jolene's disappearance. The footage revealed Jolene's car entering the parking lot of a hardware store, where the police later found it. Notably, Jennifer Seibert had stated that she and Jolene closed the salon at 5 p.m. on May 12th. But the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car arriving at the hardware store at 1:17 a.m. on May 13th, a time gap of 8 hours and 17 minutes. Jennifer visited a gas station across the street from her location. Surveillance footage from the station reveals that she entered the premises, purchased a bottle of water, and requested an employee to call a taxi for her, which later took her to her workplace, a salon. The gas station employee reported to the police that Jennifer appeared agitated and had fresh facial abrasions. As a result, Jennifer Seibert became the primary suspect in the investigation, and the police launched a search for her. Upon verifying the address she provided when applying for her job, the detectives discovered it was fictitious. Jennifer attempted to evade capture, but her efforts were unsuccessful. On May 16th, patrol officers spotted a black Kia Soul belonging to Jennifer, parked in a recreation area between two trucks, approximately 50 meters from her salon. Upon approaching the vehicle, the officers found Jennifer asleep inside. They arrested her and initially charged her with stealing Jolene Cummings's car. When the police took her to the station, detectives noticed the abrasions on her hands and face and asked her to explain how she got them. She said she had been bitten by bedbugs. The police found out that she didn't have a permanent place to live, mostly sleeping in her car and using a shower at a fitness center. After her arrest, the investigators made a surprising discovery. Jennifer Seibert wasn't her real name. Her real name was Kimberly Kessler, born in 1968, and she had been reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2012. The name Jennifer Marie Seibert belonged to a 13-year-old girl who died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 and was buried in Butler Cemetery, Pennsylvania. During a videotaped interview 48 hours later, Kimberly Kessler, seated on a couch and wearing an orange jumpsuit, calmly revealed her true identity. "When you run my fingerprints, they'll come up as Kimberly Lee Kessler. I'm 50 years old, and I've been on the run for over 25 years." The police investigation into the case revealed more about Kimberly Kessler's past. It emerged that she had begun using other people's names in 1996 while living in Pennsylvania. Since then, Kessler had used at least 18 aliases and lived in 33 cities across 14 states. Many of these names were similar, and she had taken at least half of them from gravestones and cemeteries, later obtaining fake documents to support these identities. One of the identities she used was Jennifer Seibert. In 2012, Connie Kessler, Kimberly's mother, contacted the police to report her daughter missing, despite not having heard from her since 2004. This delay in reporting her daughter's disappearance, 8 years after losing contact, suggests that the family relationships were strained. The Pennsylvania police investigated Kimberly Kessler's disappearance and determined that she was voluntarily missing, but the reasoning behind this conclusion is unclear. It is unknown whether a further investigation was conducted. Had the police found her, they likely would have discovered that she had assumed someone else's identity. Several questions remain unanswered. Why did Kessler flee, and why did she use multiple aliases? According to Connie Kessler, her daughter faced numerous challenges, including an abusive relationship with a man in 2004. Kimberly gave birth to a son, Evan, but when the relationship ended, the father took custody and prohibited Kimberly from seeing her child. The father later relocated to another state and falsely told Kimberly that their 1-year-old son had passed away. Kimberly sought to uncover the truth and locate the grave of her son. Frustrated by the lack of answers, she began searching for Evan and investigating his fate. Connie Kessler theorizes that her daughter used aliases to conceal her identity, fearing Evan's father. According to Tim Edwards, Evan's father, the circumstances were different. He claims to have had a relationship with Melissa McKernan between 1997 and 1999, resulting in the birth of their son Evan. Melissa allegedly used fake names to keep her family, including her mother, from finding her. After the couple separated, Melissa retained custody of Evan, denying Tim visitation rights. In 1999, when Evan was around 15 months old, social services intervened, taking Evan away from Melissa, who then fled the city, disappearing from Tim's life. Tim never informed Kimberly that Evan had passed away since he lost contact with Melissa after she left, and never heard from her again. Later, when Jolene vanished, Evan was 20 years old and had never seen a picture of his biological mother, until FBI agents visited their home in 2018 to gather information about Kimberly Kessler's past. However, there are inconsistencies in these stories. According to Tim Edwards' birth certificate, Evan was born in 1998, but in her interview, Connie Kessler claimed Kimberly gave birth to Evan in 2004. This discrepancy suggests that Connie Kessler was not well informed about her daughter's life, and her statement about Tim hiding Evan from his mother may not be reliable. As a result, Connie's theory that her daughter used the identities of deceased individuals to find her son and avoid detection by his father is questionable. Moreover, Kimberly was unable to provide coherent reasons to the detectives about why she needed to use multiple names. Now, let's revisit the Jolene Cummings case. After uncovering the fact that Kimberly Kessler had been living under assumed identities, the police brought forgery charges against her. A storage unit rented by Kessler was searched, yielding several significant finds, including 4 wigs, a bag containing 2 severed hair tails, and 3 mobile phones. However, the most critical piece of evidence was the discovery of Jolene Cummings' DNA on Kessler's sock and shoe. Furthermore, during a search of Kessler's vehicle, the police found scissors with Jolene's DNA on them. Notably, the blue plastic containers found at the scene will prove to be important later on. The phone seized from Kessler revealed a disturbing search history. It suggested that what happened to Jolene Cummings was not an accident, but rather something Kessler had been preparing for. On April 30th, 2018, at 3:36 a.m., Kessler searched for information on a man who was charged with murder after his co-worker's remains were found in his yard. This was followed by a search on May 8th at 1:37 a.m. for cases where a co-worker was found guilty of murder, but the body was never found. Later that day, at 7:13 a.m., Kessler searched for advice on injecting and how to use a tourniquet. She also looked up a list of female murderers by country on a website called Murderpedia, as well as a list of female murderers in Florida. Finally, she searched for information on autopsy and post-mortem changes at 6:33 p.m. The owner of the hair salon where Jolene worked reported that the plant in the pot inside the salon had been replaced. This draws attention to Kessler's search queries on May 13th, the day Jolene failed to pick up her kids. At 12:05 p.m., Kessler searched for indoor palm and then variation palm tree. A minute later, at 12:06 p.m., the police examined CCTV footage from a hypermarket selling household goods, located a few hundred yards from the Tangles hair salon. The footage showed Kessler arriving at the hypermarket on May 14th at 2:39 p.m. and leaving the store half an hour later with a plant, which would later end up at the hair salon on May 15th at 6:13 p.m. 2 days later, on May 16th at 6:27 p.m., Kessler searched online for Jolene Cummings' "I have vanished" and "No body, no crime." Forensic experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to investigate the hair salon, and their findings suggested that a serious crime had taken place there. The entire room glowed under the ultraviolet light, indicating the presence of blood or other bodily fluids. On May 22nd, the sheriff held a press conference, during which he announced, "We have gathered sufficient evidence, although some of it will remain undisclosed for the time being to protect the ongoing investigation. Sadly, our evidence leads us to conclude that Jolene Cummings has likely died." The investigators learned that, about a week before her disappearance, Jolene shared her suspicions with a colleague at the Tangles salon. She thought their new hairdresser, Jennifer, was hiding something and wasn't being genuine. According to some salon clients, the relationship between Jolene and Jennifer was strained. One client even witnessed a heated argument between the two women on May 9th, just 3 days before Jolene vanished. The Tangle Hair Salon closed its doors on June 5, 2018. Despite Kessler's attorneys managing to keep some evidence under wraps, the police released information sheds light on what happened to Jolene Cummings. However, a surveillance camera near the back of the building captured footage of the dumpster. Kessler was seen there at least 4 times. The recording shows Kessler doing something near the dumpster. Later, at 8:08 a.m., she returns to dispose of a white garbage bag. Based on how she lifts the bag, it appears to be quite heavy. 14 minutes later, she throws out another white bag. In the 4th recording, taken an hour before midnight, Kessler is seen lifting a waste container to empty its contents, suggesting that it holds something heavy. The Walmart camera footage provides insight into what Kessler threw away. The recording shows her purchasing items at the self-checkout, including garbage bags, cleaning agents, latex gloves, and notably, an electric knife. This discovery significantly impacted the police's subsequent actions. In July 2018, investigators discovered that a local waste management company had been dumping trash in a Georgia landfill. A team of nearly 200 people combed through the landfill for a week, yielding several crucial leads, although the sheriff refused to disclose them to protect the integrity of the investigation. Near the dumpster, where Kessler had discarded the white garbage bags, police recovered a piece of jewelry, women's shoes, and a blue plastic container. Notably, the container was identical to one found in Kessler's storage unit, and it tested positive for Jolene Cummings' DNA. While Jolene's body remained unfound, the accumulated evidence was sufficient to warrant Kessler's arrest for her murder. On January 17, 2019, Kimberly Kessler made her first court appearance, entering a not guilty plea. However, the trial was delayed for several years due to the judge's concerns about Kessler's mental stability. During this time, Kessler engaged in a hunger strike, which left her weighing under 88 pounds. Her court appearances were often marked by outbursts of anger. Before the 2021 court session, Kessler underwent compulsory treatment, which ultimately deemed her fit to stand trial. On December 9, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and on January 27, 2022, Kessler was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The prosecution believes Kessler's motive was to silence Jolene Cummings, who threatened to expose her lies during a press conference. Sheriff Leeper expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating that Kessler would spend the rest of her life in Florida State Prison. Unfortunately, Jolene Cummings' body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sierra Breeland. The disappearance of 31-year-old Sierra Breeland, an Indiana lawyer from Cleveland, Georgia. The last time she was seen was on February 24, 2022 at 7:17 p.m. when a surveillance camera captured her outside her mother-in-law's home in Johns Creek. Despite extensive efforts by the police and her family, Sierra's whereabouts and what happened to her remain unknown. Sierra was a cheerful and ambitious woman, according to her mother Kelly. She was determined to be taken seriously, so she worked hard to become a lawyer, following in her mother's footsteps as a paralegal. Growing up in Georgia, Sierra dreamed of living in Atlanta one day. To achieve this goal, she attended the University of Tennessee for college, and then Florida State University for law school. Kelly said Sierra was happy, energetic, loving, and extremely driven in her career. In October 2020, Sierra met Xavier Breeland on Tinder, and their relationship quickly developed. 6 months later, the couple got married, and Sierra became pregnant. According to court records, Sierra provided legal assistance to Xavier in his dispute with his ex-wife. The newlyweds decided to start a new life in Carmel, Indiana, where Sierra got a job at a law firm. In 2021, she gave birth to a son named Jackson. Xavier and Sierra appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, but their relationship was plagued by issues from the early stages. According to Shelby Campbell, Sierra's cousin, the problems between them surfaced shortly after their initial dates. Sierra had told Xavier she wanted no further contact, but he refused to accept rejection. Instead, he began showing up uninvited at her apartment, sitting outside her door. He also sent her threatening messages after seeing her with another man. Sierra warned him she would involve the authorities if he persisted. Despite this, she eventually gave him another chance, and 6 months later, they got married. Shelby and Sierra were inseparable, exchanging daily texts. Sierra confided in her, revealing her fears about her husband. In one message, she wrote, "I'm really struggling to cope with this. I don't want to give up on someone I love and abandon our family, but his behavior is getting worse, not better. It makes me wonder what the future holds. He used to feel guilty when he said hurtful things, but lately he doesn't even apologize. He blames me, saying I did this because you made me." Sierra feared that if something happened to her, her husband would be to blame. Shelby claims that she frequently advised Sierra to leave her husband, but Sierra understood the importance of planning her exit carefully. The text messages Shelby shared only provide a glimpse into the situation between Sierra and her husband. Sierra did call the police on multiple occasions, and law enforcement responded to her residence in both Georgia and Indiana multiple times. According to Campbell, by the time the police arrived, Sierra would have calmed down enough to cover for her husband, denying any abuse. Shelby revealed that an investigator even contacted Sierra's mother after one of these incidents, telling her that he knew Sierra was lying about the abuse when she called 911. The investigator had seen this pattern before and was worried that something terrible might happen to Sierra. Sierra was determined to leave her husband Xavier and had been secretly building up a bank account to prepare for her independence. Despite sending messages to Xavier claiming she loved him, she had reached the conclusion that she couldn't afford to stay in the troubled relationship. Aware of their daughter's difficulties, Sierra's parents, Kelly and Nick, encouraged her to break free from Xavier and promised her a safe haven back at home if she needed it. Sierra's decisive trip to Georgia began when she and Xavier packed up their baby and large dog into a 2017 white Volkswagen Tiguan for the 11-hour drive south. According to her family, Sierra arrived at her parents' house on February 19th, where she spent the night reconnecting with relatives she hadn't seen since moving to Indiana. Although it seemed like a brief visit, Sierra had made up her mind not to return to Indiana, marking a new chapter in her life. Xavier was interested in this trip because his mother lived in Georgia, just like Sierra's mother. However, Xavier didn't know that Sierra didn't plan to return to Indiana. Sierra had told her mother that she was going to find a job in Georgia and that she was getting a divorce due to her husband's increasing abusive behavior. On Saturday, February 19th, Sierra arrived at her parents' house in Cleveland, Georgia, where she spent the night. She reassured them that she wanted a divorce and wouldn't return to Indiana. On Sunday, February 20th, Sierra left her parents' house to pick up her son, Jackson, from her mother-in-law's house in Johns Creek, Georgia, about an hour away. Before leaving, Sierra sent a text to her cousin, Shelby Campbell, saying, "I'm at Xavier's mom's house. He won't give me Jackson, so I'm waiting to get him so I can leave." On Monday, February 21st, at 11:17 p.m., Sierra sent a text to her father, Nick, saying, "I'll be back in the morning if that's okay." Nick responded the next day, telling her it was okay and that she didn't have to ask. When Nick didn't hear back from Sierra, he reached out to her again. She replied that everything was okay and that she had been feeling a bit sick. Nick contacted her again on Wednesday to ask if she was feeling better, but he didn't receive a response. He sent another text on Thursday, February 24th, but there was still no response. By Friday, Sierra's loved ones were getting concerned because she hadn't responded, which was out of character for her. On the evening of Saturday, February 26th, Nick received a call from an unknown number based in Indiana. Initially, Nick didn't panic, assuming Sierra was still in Georgia, so he answered the call. The caller claimed to be a police officer and broke the news that Sierra had been reported missing. Apparently, her husband, Xavier, had filed a missing persons report. This revelation left the family in shock, as they had been under the impression that Sierra was still in Georgia, despite her uncharacteristic silence. What's especially puzzling, according to Shelby Campbell, is that Xavier never reached out to anyone to check on Sierra's whereabouts. He didn't call or notify anyone, which made the situation even more baffling. After speaking with the Carmel police, Sierra's father decided to call Xavier. In their conversation, Sierra's father pressured Xavier to tell the truth, reminding him that Sierra had warned her family that Xavier would be responsible if anything happened to her. Xavier responded by telling him to go to hell and then hung up the phone. After Nick called Xavier's father, who lived next to Sierra and Xavier in Carmel, the father claimed he never saw her. This was confirmed by a press release from the Carmel Police Department in Indiana on March 2nd. Xavier Breeland had earlier reported Sierra missing to the police department on Saturday, February 26, 2022. During their investigation, detectives discovered a video recording that showed Sierra's last known location, her mother-in-law's house in Georgia, on February 24th at 7:07 p.m. According to the Carmel Police Department's official report, nothing unusual happened in the video. On February 25th, Sierra left her home in the Brookstone Park subdivision in Carmel, Indiana, around 1 p.m. to walk to a nearby store. At the time, she was wearing a black top and purple shorts, and the temperature was around 20 degrees. However, police reported that she never arrived at the store, and there was no surveillance video of her entering the store. Sierra's family was concerned when she vanished, leaving behind 3 phones, ID, and credit cards. They knew she'd never leave without telling them, especially not her 5-month-old son. Her mom, Kelly, revealed Sierra had confided in her about financial struggles and alleged abuse from her husband, who used their child to control her. Kelly was adamant Sierra wouldn't abandon her son, believing she'd be dead before doing so. On February 28, 2022, 2 days after reporting his wife Sierra missing, Xavier had an unexpected visit from the police at his doorstep. According to court documents, there was an accidental discharge of a firearm at a residence on Baldwin Lane. Xavier claimed to have been moving a Christmas tree in the garage when he heard the gunshot, prompting him to run outside. He then returned to the garage, found the gun, and unloaded it before calling the police to report the incident himself. The investigation revealed that there were 2 guns in his house. However, the police did not read information across Metro Atlanta. The family requested anyone who saw a white 2017 Volkswagen Tiguan with Georgia license plate RMB 58869, which had a university law school frame around the plate, to contact the police. The vehicle was searched for evidence by forensic investigators and subsequently released. As Sierra was last seen at her mother-in-law's house in Georgia, police suspected that her disappearance might be linked to something that occurred at this location. Police traced the route Xavier took back to Indiana, but were unable to confirm whether Sierra was in the car. Notably, Xavier was the only person who got out of the white Volkswagen at gas stations and shops. The level of cooperation from Xavier's mother during the investigation remains unclear, but law enforcement officials confirmed that evidence was collected from the residence through a search warrant as part of their investigation. Johns Creek investigators, including forensic experts and cadaver dogs, searched the area for signs of a struggle or clues to the couple's disappearance. Despite a K-9 unit's involvement, no scent trail was found, and gathered evidence remains undisclosed due to the ongoing investigation. Xavier Breeland was arrested in Georgia on March 16, 2022, for aggravated stalking. This stemmed from a 2021 incident where he hid a tracking device to stalk the mother of his child, who had a restraining order against him. He was later found not guilty, but arrested again and extradited to Indiana for unlawful possession of a firearm. Xavier Breeland asked a judge to lower his bond to to an affordable amount for his mother. The court initially set it at $35,000, but prosecutors requested $50,000. After Breeland appealed, the judge set it at $100,000. He was released in February 2023 after posting bail. Ciaria's disappearance remains a mystery despite extensive searches. She was last seen at a store, and investigations have pinpointed several potential locations. The vast search area spans millions of acres of state and federal land, parks, and undeveloped areas in Georgia, plus thousands of acres of railroad and utility easements. According to Kelly Breeland, law enforcement has gathered evidence and statements from multiple states, but these are like puzzle pieces without a complete picture. Some items were removed from Xavier's mother's home, as revealed in court documents related to a civil case filed by Xavier's mother against Xavier's sister. As part of their search, crime scene investigators cut and removed the carpet and mattress from Xavier's mother's home on April 21, 2022, according to documents from the familial civil dispute. After Xavier Breeland's arrest on March 1st, 5-month-old Jackson was placed into state care. Since then, Jackson's grandparents, Nick and Kelly Miller, have been able to be with the infant and are working to bring the baby back home to Georgia. Past year, numerous searches focused on specific areas, but no leads on the new mom's disappearance. Police reconstruct events, distribute flyers, and use electronic signs to raise awareness. Ciaria, 5'7", 120 pounds, blonde hair with distinct tattoos. She was last seen in a white 2017 VW Tiguan with GA plate RMB 5869. If seen in Feb, contact authorities. Xavier is the only person of interest that police have publicly named in connection with Ciaria's disappearance. But so far, no charges have been filed against him. Despite this, Ciaria's family remains convinced that Xavier knows what happened to her and is the only one who can provide the answers they need to bring closure and allow Ciaria to rest in peace. Kelly Breeland, a family member, believes that Ciaria's body might be located in one of 4 states: Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, or Indiana. She is appealing to outdoorsmen and fishermen in these states to be vigilant and report any information they might have to the authorities. In a separate development, Ciaria's parents have been granted custody of the couple's child. It's worth noting that Xavier Breeland was previously arrested and released on bail for illegal possession of firearms. His trial was set to take place on December 28, 2023, but he failed to appear in court, and his current whereabouts are unknown. As a result, a rearrest warrant has been issued, and law enforcement is working to track him down. This recent development adds another layer of complexity to the already puzzling case of Ciaria's disappearance. Xavier Breeland, a 6'1" tall, 160-pound black man with brown hair and green eyes, has gone missing. There is a warrant out for his arrest, and the FBI has joined the search for the missing woman, Ciaria, whose body has not been found. The disappearances of both Xavier and Ciaria have raised many unanswered questions. Ciaria's mother, Kelly Breeland, believes her daughter was afraid of Xavier and did not plan to return to Indiana with him. With both individuals now missing, the case has become even more urgent. The trial related to Xavier's gun charge has been postponed multiple times. Law enforcement and Ciaria's family are now seeking the public's help in finding Xavier and Ciaria, hoping to shed light on the mysterious circumstances surrounding their disappearances. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970, at least one sibling, and an Indiana, United States upbringing. Hailing from a middle-class family, he was an entrepreneurial youth with a passion for independence, self-improvement, and a drive to succeed. Unsurprisingly, after high school, he sought ways to earn a living. According to his brother, his first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, although his tenure was short-lived for unknown reasons. Undeterred, he soon found a new opportunity that offered greater autonomy and led him to discover his true calling, sales. John started his career as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. a path that initially drew mockery from his family. However, in a remarkably short period, John proved his doubters wrong, discovering his true calling in life. By the end of his first year, he had risen to become the top-performing salesman in the area, and he made it clear that he had no intention of stopping there. Putting in long hours, often exceeding 12 to 16 hours a day, John became not only a sales leader whose accomplishments were regularly recognized at company meetings, but also a mentor and inspiration to his fellow salespeople, who drew new ideas and motivation from him. During this time, John met 20-year-old Judy, a young woman from a low-income family of 3 children in Texas, born in October 1969. Judy was outgoing and confident, and despite John not being actively seeking new salespeople, she persuaded him that she excelled in sales. Though young, Judy was far from shy. In fact, she had already been married at 14 with her parents' consent, was divorced, and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, by the time she met John. Impressed, John gave Judy a chance and became her mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy earn a spot in John's sales force, but she also captured her boss's heart, and they eventually started a romantic relationship. John's life was thriving. As a renowned salesman and trainer, he had earned an excellent reputation, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life was invaluable. With this solid foundation, he decided to take the leap and start his own business in Michigan, becoming a sales and service operator for Kirby vacuum cleaners. In addition, he offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and infectious enthusiasm that had contributed to his success in the industry. John's company soon became one of the top performers in the area, a feat he always attributed to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, with his professional life firmly established, John and Judy got married. The following years were dedicated to demonstrating the potential achievements of a successful salesperson. They had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, adding to their family of 4. As their fortunes grew, they relocated to better residences, and their children began to reap the benefits of John and Judy's hard work. John initially got along well with his wife's children. Christina was a sweet and innocent girl, while Daniel was hyperactive and a bit mischievous. The Parkers had a comfortable life, with excellent schools for the kids, luxurious cars, and frequent vacations. John was building a substantial fortune and wanted to inspire the young salespeople he trained by showing them what they could achieve through hard work. However, Christina's choice of friends was concerning, as she hung out with kids who had behavioral issues and even drank with them. There were also rumors that she used drugs. Meanwhile, 13-year-old Daniel was heading down a troubled path, often appearing angry and poorly supervised. One incident involved Daniel taking John's car without permission and driving recklessly around the neighborhood, damaging many mailbox posts. The next day, John visited the affected homeowners to pay for the damages and avoid having Daniel reported to the police. Around the same time, John was summoned to Daniel's school to address a complaint about his bad behavior. Unfortunately, the encounter ended with John physically disciplining the boy, which created tension in their relationship. After 9 years together, Judy decided it was time to introduce her family to the humble Texas town where she grew up, and to reconnect with one of her brothers, who still called it home. During their visit, Judy confided in her brother that her marriage was on the brink of collapse, and that John's behavior towards her children was a major concern. However, the reality was that Judy herself was failing to acknowledge her older children's wayward paths, instead siding with them, which only added fuel to the already volatile situation. John's situation went from bad to worse when he began to suspect that his wife was having an affair with one of his company's employees. As a man of action, John didn't let problems simmer. He addressed them head-on. To be certain of his suspicions, he installed cameras around the office and eventually gathered irrefutable evidence. This confirmation crushed John, and his friendly demeanor took a drastic turn for the worse. He started drinking excessively, which led to violent arguments with Judy and rough treatment of his children. One day, he brutally beat his daughter Tiffany with a belt after her teacher informed him that she had forgotten her homework. The teacher noticed the marks the next day and reported the incident to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the four kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they needed to keep quiet about the beating. Tiffany ended up blaming her stepbrother Daniel, who didn't deny the accusations. John's bad mood didn't only affect his family, it also had a significant impact on his employees and the company's clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to separate his wife from her lover, John decided to relocate the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving Judy and hoping that by removing her from temptation, they could start anew, things didn't improve. Although Judy made an effort to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, John, on the other hand, let his beard grow, started smoking, and his wardrobe became limited to jeans. His constant distraction led to the decline of the business, which almost went bankrupt, forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, although it was unclear whether the rumors were true or not. These rumors undoubtedly fueled more disagreements between they. At a certain point, Judy dropped a bombshell. She wanted a divorce, but John knew it wouldn't be that straightforward. He felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, embracing her children, lavishing her with luxuries, and loving her with an all-consuming passion. Now that same passion had curdled into bitter resentment. He retaliated by severing all her financial lifelines. He made it crystal clear, if she walked out, she'd leave with nothing. And he had the ultimate trump card, a recording of her illicit affair with a colleague. At the start of 2003, the strained relationship between John and Judy had taken its toll on their children, whose behavior continued to deteriorate. Tiffany's actions were particularly concerning, having recently been grounded for setting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The turning point came on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy decided to have dinner alone at a restaurant, likely in an attempt to find a resolution to their marital issues, or, at the very least, ease the tension. After dining, they phoned home to check on the kids and informed them they would be back soon. Christina requested that they stop by her office to pick up a forgotten school notebook. On their way back, they made a detour to the office, and John took the opportunity to drop off the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was allegedly working late. They arrived at the office in a deserted industrial area just before 10 p.m. As John talked to Jeff inside, Judy retrieved her daughter's notebook and headed back to their car parked outside. Moments later, John emerged from the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side to search for something in the vehicle. Suddenly, two loud bangs echoed through the air, and John crumpled to the parking lot floor. Almost instantly, 911 operators received frantic calls from Judy and Jeff. Police and medical assistance units responded to the scene within minutes. Tragically, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was declared dead at the scene. When questioned, Judy, who was inside the car at the time of the incident, was unable to provide much insight. She stated that she had been sitting in the car when her husband emerged from the office, opened the back door on the driver's side, and immediately heard two shots. Judy recalled that upon hearing the gunfire, she instinctively hid, using the seat for cover, and when she finally looked up, she caught a glimpse of a dark-clad figure fleeing the scene. John's wallet was missing, leading investigators to initially suspect a robbery. However, as they delved deeper into the scene, doubts began to arise. Several questions troubled the investigators. Why would someone target this desolate industrial area at night, with no one around to witness the crime? If it were a robbery, why would the perpetrator take John's life first and then steal his wallet, when they could have easily taken the $20,000 gold Rolex he was wearing, as well as other accessible jewelry? And why didn't the thief search John's pockets, a common practice in such assaults? 2 bullet casings were recovered at the scene, corroborating Judy's account of hearing 2 explosions. One of the shots had killed John almost instantly, while the fate of the second remained unclear due to a lack of official information. With their minds racing with questions, the investigators launched their inquiry. And naturally, Judy was the first to be questioned. She revealed that her husband had a dispute with a company employee sometime prior and was able to identify the individual. However, beyond this, Judy was unable to provide any further insight beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, likewise, proved unhelpful. He was inside the office and only emerged after hearing the shots, by which time everything was already over. Meanwhile, the authorities contacted the Parker residence, where Christina answered the call and was informed of her stepfather's passing. With the robbery motive all but dismissed, detectives shifted their focus to John's inner circle, starting with the disgruntled employee who had allegedly harbored resentment. The man acknowledged their intense argument, but claimed it had been amicably resolved, and his alibi checked out after a thorough investigation. The investigation subsequently cast a wide net, encompassing nearly everyone close to the young businessman: business partners, past and current employees, competitors, and even John's friends and family. The only somewhat suspect discovery was the interaction between the widow and the company's general manager, though it ultimately yielded no concrete evidence. Judy's demeanor at her husband's funeral was peculiar, to say the least. Observers noted that she seemed cheerful, chatting with friends and acquaintances, a stark contrast to the somber mood expected of her. Meanwhile, her ex-husband, father of their 2 children, appeared surprisingly at ease, casually reading a newspaper during the service. 4 days after John's murder, 15-year-old Daniel was questioned about his involvement. 6 months prior, Daniel had paid gang members to kill his stepfather, but they kept the money and didn't follow through. After John's murder, investigators looked into Daniel again. Daniel confessed to paying to hurt John, not kill him, but was released after 9 days due to lack of evidence. Later, it was revealed that John's issues with Judy's children had sparked a deeper investigation into Daniel, which led to suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and like before, the alleged plan was dismissed. Investigators became curious about the funding behind these schemes, suspecting Judy as the primary source, given that both teenagers had expressed a desire to eliminate John. Further inquiry revealed that Judy and John's relationship had significantly deteriorated prior to his death, with at least one of Judy's extramarital affairs coming to light. However, sources indicated that John was committed to salvaging the relationship and had no intention of leaving his wife. The primary motive behind Judy's alleged targeting of her husband seemed to be financial, with detectives discovering 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. Judy had attempted to claim this money following her husband's death, but the insurance company initially refused to pay out, citing the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was further complicated by John's father, who harbored suspicions about Judy's involvement in his son's demise. Despite these leads, the case eventually stalled, with only circumstantial evidence available. However, significant changes occurred within the Parker family household. Judy was rarely home, preoccupied with her new partner, Jeff, John's trusted manager. In her absence, the older siblings took care of their younger half-sisters, Tiffany and Erica. Months later, Judy and Jeff decided to move out of state with Judy's younger daughters, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and with a boyfriend. Although the case stalled, authorities stayed vigilant, revisiting files for a break. After a new lead, they questioned Christina and Daniel's schoolmates, who confessed to selling them a gun. This tip led detectives to Christina's family land, where they found bullet casings matching those from John's crime scene. In 2007, a narcotics officer who had been investigating Christina's ex-boyfriend in a drug-related case came forward with crucial information. The ex-boyfriend, seeking a more lenient sentence, revealed a conversation he had with Judy in which she implicated her son Daniel as the one who had fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new evidence, 21-year-old Christina, whose connection to the murder weapon had already been established, quickly began to cooperate. She confessed to buying the weapon and calling her parents on the night of the incident, asking them to stop by the office under the guise of picking up forgotten homework. She also admitted to being involved in the plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel as the designated shooter. When 19-year-old Daniel was apprehended in Arizona, he was confronted with the new ballistics evidence and his sister's testimony. He promptly confessed to shooting John, but claimed that Judy, their mother, orchestrated the entire plot. Daniel revealed that Judy had fraudulently cashed company checks to raise the $7,500 needed to hire hitmen, but the initial plan failed when the hired individuals took the money without fulfilling their contract. Judy then allegedly instructed them to buy the weapon for Daniel to use. Moreover, Daniel claimed it was Judy's idea to fabricate the pretext for leaving the house that night by making the call about the homework. He admitted to shooting John once in the head, and the second shot was an accidental discharge while searching John's pocket for his wallet, as per his mother's instructions. He was also told to return home without arousing his younger sisters, a task made possible by Christina, who kept the girls occupied with television. The siblings alleged that their mother had coerced them into committing the crime by claiming they were victims of abuse at the hands of John, and promising them a better life filled with more money and freedom. It was also disclosed that this was not Judy's first attempt to kill her husband, as she had previously attempted to poison his food, resulting in only a brief hospitalization for John under the pretense of food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail several months later in March 2008. Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge for involvement in his stepfather's murder and agreed to cooperate, implicating his mother in the crime. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the more serious charge of murder, although Daniel still faced a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison. According to Daniel, nearly a year prior to the incident, when he was just 14, his mother and sister first approached him to participate in John's murder. He claimed that his mother provided him and his sister with money to purchase a handgun, along with black clothing, gloves, and a mask for the day of the crime. She also allegedly gave him explicit instructions on how to carry out the task, including taking a thorough shower upon returning home to eliminate any traces of gunpowder residue. Ultimately, Judy took it upon herself to dispose of the weapon, the clothes worn during the crime, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after her husband's death, Judy faced the inevitable and surrendered to the authorities, agreeing to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. By doing so, she acknowledged her role in planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution requested a life sentence with a minimum of 28 years and a maximum of 35 years. Nearing 40, Judy was sentenced to 33 years in prison in late August 2009. The following month, Daniel received a 23-year sentence, and in early October, Christina, who pleaded guilty to aiding a criminal, was sentenced to 5 years. Press reports indicate that Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and subsequently lived a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but tragically died from a drug overdose shortly after her release. This case is defined by unrelenting greed. Judy's difficult early life and subsequent success only fueled her insatiable desire for more, driving her to commit appalling crimes. Tragically, her actions not only ruined a thriving entrepreneur, but also had a profound impact on her 4 children, resulting in 2 being imprisoned and leaving the younger ones once again without their father and mother. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marta del Castillo. Marta del Castillo was born on June 19, 1991 in Seville, Spain, to Eva Casanova and Antonio del Castillo. At 17, her life took a devastating turn. On January 24, 2009, Marta was chatting with her best friend Sylvia Fernandez when she abruptly ended the conversation, telling her she had to leave in a hurry because her boyfriend Miguel Carcano was waiting downstairs. She promised to fill her friend in on everything when she returned, saying she needed to clarify some issues in their relationship. In the hallway, Marta encountered her father, who cautioned her against getting on Miguel's motorcycle, but she simply kissed him on the cheek and left. At 5:30 p.m., Marta departed, and as the hours ticked by with no sign of her, her family grew increasingly worried. Her mother began calling acquaintances who might know something about Marta's whereabouts, including Carcano. Everyone seemed to think she was with Miguel, but when he failed to answer their calls, Marta's father decided to visit the boy's house. He rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one responded. It wasn't until they managed to contact Samuel Benitez, a close friend of Miguel's, that they learned Marta had been dropped off at his house around midnight. This struck Marta's mother as suspicious, given the time was only 11:45. At 2 a.m., Marta's family reported her disappearance, but they had no idea it would become one of the most sensational cases in the country's history. 4 hours later, the police disclosed that Marta's boyfriend, Miguel Carcano, was already a suspect. At 1:30 p.m., a third report was filed, but the police failed to act, leaving the family increasingly frustrated. It wasn't until 17 hours after the initial request for help, as stipulated by protocol, that the officers finally began searching for Marta. In the days that followed, the family took it upon themselves to gather statements from relatives and friends of the young girl. On January 27, 2009, the family held their first press conference, simultaneously launching a campaign to find Marta. The next day, approximately 2,000 people protested in Seville, demanding the young girl's safe return under the rallying cry, "We are all Marta." Another demonstration was convened on February 7th, drawing around 3,000 people. The case continued to captivate the nation, dominating television and newspaper headlines. After 21 days of searching, the police finally located Miguel Carcano on February 13th. The 20-year-old took full responsibility for the case, confessing that he had murdered Marta and dumped her body into the Guave River near his apartment. He also revealed a crucial detail: he did not act alone. He identified Samuel Benitez as one of his accomplices, claiming Benitez had helped dispose of the body. Benitez accepted culpability. Later, Miguel implicated Javier Garcia Marin, a troubled miner known as El Cuco, and Francisco Delgado, his brother, as well as his girlfriend Maria Garcia, as co-conspirators. All 5 were arrested. The subsequent interrogations yielded a wave of contradictions, while a thorough search for Marta's body in the river was simultaneously launched. On February 16th, Carcano repeated his statement before a judge, in contrast to his friend Samuel, who distanced himself from the case, denying any involvement in Marta's murder and attributing his earlier confession to police pressure on March 18th. Miguel Carcano requested to revise his statement, altering his account of events. He claimed that he and El Cuco had assaulted Marta at knife point, after which the miner strangled her. They then transported her body to Delgado's house and subsequently disposed of it in a garbage container. In response to these declarations, the judge ordered the search efforts in the Guave River to be suspended and redirected the investigation to a landfill. Marta's father pointed the finger at Delgado's girlfriend, as her father worked at a biological waste crematorium suggesting that the body might have been incinerated. This theory gained significant media attention, but the police pressed on with their search. On November 16, 2009, Miguel's preventive detention term ended, and he was moved to a supervised flat to await trial. In February 2011, he faced retrial on charges of abuse and murder. Although he was cleared of these charges due to lack of sufficient evidence, he received a 2-year and 11-month sentence in a juvenile detention center for concealing Carcano's crimes. On October 17, 2011, the trial of the 4 adult defendants finally began. During the trial, Miguel Carcano provided new details about Marta's murder, stating he had struck her with an ashtray during a heated argument, which led to her death. He revealed that his previous statements about abusing her were false. His brother, his brother's girlfriend, and Benitez maintained their innocence, claiming they knew nothing about Marta's body, and that Carcano fabricated stories to shift the blame. By November 22, 2011, forensic police had confirmed the presence of Marta's blood on Miguel's jacket and a mix of Miguel's and Maria Garcia's genetic profiles on a roll of fabric tape, a cord, and an extension cable believed to have been used to strangle Marta. This evidence contradicted Maria Garcia's alibi, as she had insisted she was only at the crime scene in the early morning and was unaware of the incident. The discovery of her lie led to accusations of desecrating the body and cover-up. Furthermore, the police identified up to 5 fingerprints on 3 alcohol bottles, including one belonging to El Cuco. Benitez was the only suspect against whom no evidence was found. By this point, the 5 youths were under intense public scrutiny. The initial trials took place with a significant police presence, and the prosecution sought prison sentences for Carcano, Benitez, Delgado, and Garcia, relying on a total of 90 witnesses, including national police officers and experts, 30,000 pH monitorings, crime scene photographs, DNA evidence collected by the forensic police, and items discovered at the Leon 13 residence. The trials sparked a public outcry, with people pressing against the police cordon, demanding to see Marta's body. Delgado and his girlfriend emerged, shrouded in Bacchus and sunglasses, but they couldn't evade the crowd. A woman confronted them, hurling insults, while others tried to rip off their sunglasses, pushing them to expose their faces to the throng. During the trial, El Cuco's mother granted an interview, her face obscured. She vehemently maintained her son's innocence, claiming neither she nor he had any knowledge of Marta's whereabouts. Journalists' skepticism was palpable, labeling her a liar, but she remained unfazed. She received a considerable sum of €10,000 for the interview. A few days later, Marta's family petitioned for the earnings to be regulated and the money to be used to face her son's impending sentence. A key witness, a taxi driver, testified that he drove Delgado on the night of the crime. Shaken by a colleague's recent murder, he remembered a bald, bearded man who stared at him intensely and was dropped off at Leon 13th Street, the crime scene, for €8. However, the defense argued the fare should have been €5, not €8, questioning the driver's credibility. Marta's parents testified, describing the deep pain and suffering they were experiencing as a result of the situation. They had been forced to give up their jobs, seek psychiatric help, and even struggle with depression. Marta's sisters, their other 2 daughters, were also going through a very difficult time. The whole family just wanted the ordeal to come to an end. The jury's verdict in 2012 disappointed the family. Carcano got a 21-year, 3-month sentence for the girl's murder. He was banned from the city for 30 years and ordered to pay €280,000 to her parents and €30,000 to each sister for moral damage. 3 individuals, Delgado, Maria Garcia, and Sanel Benitez, were released from custody due to lack of evidence linking them to the crime scene at the time of the murder. The following year, Delgado and Benitez took action against Marta's family, demanding they cover the trial costs. In response, Marta's father vowed to pursue justice beyond Spain's borders, criticizing the country's justice system as outdated. He even threatened to take his case to Strasbourg, home to the European Parliament and the European Court of Human Rights. In December 2011, Marta's mother penned a heartfelt letter to Carcano, who was incarcerated at the time, pleading with him to end the anguish of not knowing the whereabouts of her daughter's body. She yearned for Marta to rest in peace in a place where she could visit, bring flowers, and converse with her. However, Carcano never responded to the letter. On January 24, 2012, 3 years after Marta's disappearance, widespread demonstrations erupted in cities and towns across Spain, demanding justice for the young girl. Incarcerated and facing threats from fellow inmates, Carcano later attempted to take his own life. As a result, he was transferred to a therapeutic unit, where he was denied visitation rights and phone privileges. The murderer was extremely active during his imprisonment, concocting as many as 7 different accounts of the crime, which led to several lawyers abandoning his defense. In his 2013 testimony, he implicated someone close to him as the perpetrator. Carcano claimed an argument erupted between him and his brother over the mortgage on their house at Leon 13. Before that, he wrote a letter to his family expressing his desire to stop covering for Delgado. According to this latest testimony, a dispute arose over a fraudulent loan, and the conversation escalated to the point where Delgado allegedly threatened his brother with a weapon. When Marta intervened, she supposedly received a fatal blow from the butt of Delgado's gun. Delgado then made a call, but Miguel claims he doesn't know who it was to or what was discussed. However, he remembers fleeing the house, leaving Marta lifeless in the room. At this point, El Cuco arrived, and Miguel requested his help to dispose of the body using a wheelchair. They transported the body to the Mahala farm in Lanada and buried it there. Marta's parents believed Carcano's story and respected him, despite the suspicious events that had unfolded. They asked for the investigation to be reopened, with a focus on Miguel's brother. However, the prosecution and the judge did not take the statements seriously. Marta's father decided to visit Carcano in prison, asking him to cooperate. He told Carcano that he had bought the house at Leon 13 and promised that it would be his once he was released if he helped find Marta's body. The search for Marta's body was one of the most expensive in the country's history, covering both land and sea. The initial search took place in the Guadalave River. However, when agents tried to recreate the events, several inconsistencies appeared. It became clear that it was impossible for the 3 individuals, Carano, El Cuco, and Benitez, to transport the body together on a motorcycle, especially since they would have had to carry Marta's body. During the reenactment, the body fell to the ground as soon as the motorcycle started moving. After Carano made the claim that Marta's body had been dumped in a trash bin, a massive search operation was launched at the city's main landfill. Due to the significant time that had passed since Marta's disappearance, and the enormous amount of waste the landfill received daily, the search team estimated they would need to sift through around 40,000 tons of garbage to find any evidence. The search effort lasted 32 days, but was unsuccessful, mainly because Carano kept changing his story, providing up to 4 different locations where he claimed the body was buried, prompting new searches each time. Search paused due to lack of funds during Interior Minister Alfredo Perez's tenure. In 2013, Carano accused his brother of Marta's murder, providing a new location. Despite damaged credibility, a new search was launched. Carano guided police to the area, but failed to provide precise directions. Police excavated 6 farms, scanning 10,000 square meters, but found no evidence. All the searches were in vain, and at the request of the parents, the search for the body was halted on 2015. The public ministry asked the defendants to jointly compensate the Ministry of the Interior with a sum of $666,329. Oscar presented himself to Roselia, Marta's mother, as a criminal, but in reality, he was an infiltrator seeking a confession. Over time, they began to meet frequently, and Roselia trusted him with the keys to her house. Oscar recorded 600 hours of conversation between Roselia and her surroundings. In October 2011, El Cuco was already granted release permits from the juvenile center to which he had been sent for covering up for Carano. During a conversation, Oscar asked the young man if he thought the police were following him, to which El Cuco responded affirmatively, asserting they would do so to find out where they got rid of Marta. This statement forever incriminated him. After finishing talking, El Cuco immediately realized what he had said and quickly rectified, asserting he hadn't done anything, while Oscar played along as if he hadn't noticed. In other tapes, El Cuco mocked the police's efforts to find the body, and Roselia discussed how inept the investigators had been for not auditing the calls from her mobile phone. Despite the hard work of the man, those 600 hours of recordings were never judicialized. Only in 2022, 13 years after Marta's disappearance, did the infiltrators' work yield results. On May 26, 2022, dozens of people, especially neighbors of Marta's family, gathered at the courthouse doors wanting to accompany them due to the celebration of the new judicial process. Roselia and El Cuco arrived at the courthouse shielded by the police, with the young man being entirely covered, wearing a large hoodie, a balaclava, sunglasses, and even gloves, while Roselia was wearing sunglasses, a mask, and a headscarf. In 2011, El Cuco declared that he had not been in the flat on Lyon 13th Street where the crime occurred, but with several friends. He said he had gone home at 11:30 at night and had met his mother's partner, who had gone out to throw out the garbage, then had gone up to his house and had not left for the rest of the night. Roselia, for her part, said she had gone out with her partner for drinks around 11:30 at night and had returned home around 1:30 in the morning on January 25th, finding her son asleep there. El Cuco confessed that on the night of January 24th, Carano called him after having murdered Marta and asked him for help to bury her body. Along with Benitez, they took his mother's car and went to Lyon 13, where Delgado was also found. Meanwhile, Roselia was at the bar and stayed there until 4:30 in the morning when she got home, and her son was still missing. Both El Cuco and his mother were charged with perjury, the ACT aggravated by having obstructed the judicial procedure ongoing since 2009. Both El Cuco and Roselia accepted responsibility for their acts. The trial was held, and the judge suspended all scheduled witness statements, leaving Marta's parents distressed as they had called Carcano to testify in hopes he would finally reveal their daughter's whereabouts. On June 9, 2022, both El Cuco and Roselia were sentenced to 2 and 2 years in prison, and the judge also imposed a fine of €11,440 each and a civil liability payment of €30,000 to Marta's parents. However, they didn't care about the money. They still wanted just one thing: to find the body of their daughter. That same year, the investigative judge authorized the expert to access the mobile phones of Carano and Marta. However, he did not grant permission to do the same with the rest of the individuals involved in the case, as there currently is no evidence against them. Carcano consented to his phone being examined, insisting they would find evidence pointing to his brother as the actual murderer. Yet the main goal was to determine the location of the long-sought body. Although looking for new leads in the criminal case was prohibited, the expert never submitted his findings, and thus the case was closed indefinitely in November 2022. 13 years after Marta's murder, the civil court decided to close the separate investigation for the search of the body, deeming the legally stipulated investigation period as expired without any new significant discoveries. Marta's parents came to terms with the fact that Carcano would never reveal the location of their daughter's body and decided to sell the flat where the crime occurred. Marta's case will join countless other unresolved cases worldwide, with documents gathering dust on a desk. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Johnia Berry. Johnia Berry was born on August 26, 1983, and grew up to be a happy and friendly person with a large social circle and a love for parties. During her school days, she was an active member of the local cheerleading team. After completing high school, Johnia enrolled at East Tennessee State University to pursue a degree in psychology and criminology. It was during this period that she met Jason White, and they began dating. The couple got engaged just before graduating in late 2004. At the age of 21, Johnia decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, which led her to temporarily relocate to Knoxville for her studies. While in Knoxville, she worked part-time at a children's educational center, where she discovered her passion for helping kids. Meanwhile, Johnia's fiancé, Jason, was studying law in a different state. Despite the distance, they remained close and began planning their wedding in Knoxville. Initially, Johnia stayed with her friend, Jason Amami, who had also attended college with her and later moved to Knoxville. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Jason allowed Johnia to stay there until she found her own place to live. Johnia had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and the other at a children's hospital. On the Sunday night of December 5th, after finishing her shift at the jewelry store, Johnia went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. Later, she returned home and spent her evening wrapping presents for the children at the educational center, chatting with her neighbor, and then retreating to her room. Before going to bed, she had a phone conversation with her boyfriend. Around 4 in the morning, Jason Amami was awoken by a scream from a woman. At first, he thought Johnia was having a nightmare, so he went to her room to check on her. However, he was shocked to find a stranger wielding a knife. The intruder attacked Jason, and they engaged in a fierce struggle. Eventually, Jason managed to fend off the attacker and made a dash for the door. He rushed out of the apartment and ran to the nearest convenience store, almost a kilometer away, to call for help. When the store clerk saw Jason, who was covered in blood, they immediately called 911. Jason explained to the police what had happened when they arrived at the scene. At their apartment, the police found Johnia lying in the hallway that connected 5 apartments. She was still alive, but barely conscious. When the police questioned her about the attacker, she could only provide weak clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area, but were unable to find the attacker. They rushed Johnia to the nearest hospital, where despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save her. The doctor reported that she had suffered more than 20 stab wounds, making survival highly unlikely. Jason had 8 wounds from the attacker. Although only one was critical, he received medical attention, and his life was no longer in danger. Meanwhile, the detectives began investigating the crime scene. They discovered blood in the hallway, indicating that Johnia had attempted to seek help from her neighbors, but none of them had opened their doors. Next to Johnia's room, the detectives found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Jason, which the attacker had used with such force that it became bent and damaged. The police discovered blood near the back door of the apartment and on the stairs leading to the street. As Jason and Johnia had exited through the front door, detectives believed the killer likely escaped through the back door in Jason's room. Another clue was found, a partial footprint, possibly left by the attacker when they followed Jason and attacked him. The brutal nature of Johnia's murder led police to suspect a personal motive. Initial investigations focused on Johnia's boyfriend, despite him being approximately 1,000 kilometers away from Knoxville. However, friends and family testified to their wonderful relationship, and he had no apparent reason to commit such a heinous crime. He learned of Johnia's death when her mother called him at 10 a.m. and claimed to have fainted and taken a long time to recover. In his incapacitated state, he required a neighbor's assistance to book a plane ticket and pack his suitcase. After carefully verifying his alibi, investigators concluded he couldn't have physically traveled to Knoxville and back by morning, thus ruling him out as a suspect and shifting their attention to Johnia's neighbor. In contrast to Johnia's boyfriend, who had a solid alibi, this particular neighbor did not, which raised suspicions that he might be the perpetrator. Many friends and family members of Johnia suspected him, with some believing he could be the killer, and others accusing him of leaving Johnia behind as he fled the apartment. The suspicion was so deep-seated that Johnia's parents didn't even want him to attend her funeral. After Jason was released from the hospital, investigators started questioning him. He maintained his original story, stating that he had heard screams, seen an unfamiliar man, and was attacked after successfully fighting off the attacker. Jason rushed to the front door, went out into the street, and sought help from the neighbors. He thought Johnia had also escaped from the apartment because he could no longer hear her screams. However, the police had doubts about the truth of this testimony. Doubts about Jason initially stemmed from his injuries. Although he had 8 wounds, 7 were superficial, and the 8th on his right arm could have been sustained while either defending himself or attacking someone. Furthermore, the absence of forced entry into the apartment suggested that the assailant might have already been inside. Jason claimed to have taken out the trash through the back door that night, but he couldn't recall whether he had locked it. The detectives pressed him further, focusing on which door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason maintained that he had left through the front door, but the police suspected he was lying. If Jason had actually exited through the back door, it would account for the bloodstains near the door leading to the stairs, thereby heightening suspicions against him. Additionally, the police accused him of using and selling illegal drugs and of becoming aggressive when he couldn't get his fix. Jason denied all these allegations, but the investigators continued to level various charges against him. After spending several hours at the police station, the detectives asked Jason to take a polygraph test, and to their surprise, he accepted. An expert was brought in to administer the test, during which Jason was asked a series of leading questions. When the test was over, the investigators told him that he had failed, suggesting that his responses were false. This news caused Jason to become extremely upset, shouting that he was innocent and had no involvement in the crime, that his life was in danger, and that the real perpetrator was still at large. Despite his protests, the detectives remained skeptical. Police couldn't charge Jason due to lack of evidence. Lab analysis of the murder weapon revealed 3 DNA samples: the victim's, Jason's, and an unknown man's. The unknown DNA was also found elsewhere in the apartment. A bloody fingerprint on the knife handle didn't match Jason's. These findings suggested another person was present, but the unknown DNA didn't match any in the database. Despite this, public opinion still doubted Jason's innocence. Jason developed PTSD after a flawed polygraph test led to false accusations. In reality, Jason had severe lung and neck injuries with little hope of recovery. However, due to police report inaccuracies, his treatment was only 25% covered, leaving him in financial distress. After the police stopped suspecting him, they started questioning Jason as a witness. Based on his account, they managed to create a rough description of the attacker. However, the situation was complicated by the fact that Jason didn't get a clear look at the assailant's face. The apartment was dimly lit, and the attacker had pounced on him as soon as he left the room. In Johnia's room, the investigators made an intriguing discovery. A cap was found near the back staircase, along with discs and a stereo player. At first, they thought these items might belong to Johnia or Jason, but Jason denied any connection to them, claiming they were not in his apartment. This led the investigators to suspect that the killer might have left them behind. The police released a rough sketch of the suspect to the media, and after it was published, they received hundreds of leads. Many people reported individuals who vaguely matched the sketch, prompting the detectives to investigate each of these leads. One lead in particular caught their attention: a group of local teenagers known to break into houses to steal. One of these teenagers, 19-year-old Michael, bore a resemblance to the suspect's sketch. The police launched a search for Michael, which was made more complicated by the fact that he was already wanted for theft. With the possibility of his involvement in murder, 2 police units joined the search for Michael. They tracked down Michael and brought him in for questioning about the murder. As soon as he was in custody, the investigators turned their attention to his shoes, which had a tread pattern that was similar to the footprint found at the crime scene. They took DNA and fingerprint samples from Michael and sent them to the lab for analysis. While waiting for the results, they questioned him, and he made a surprising confession. Michael claimed that he and a friend had broken into Gia's apartment that night, intending to steal valuables. However, he said his friend had taken a knife and attacked Gia. But the detectives soon grew suspicious of Michael's story. The details he provided didn't match the evidence they had collected, and there was no sign of 2 strangers at the crime scene. The lab results only added to their doubts. Michael's DNA and fingerprints didn't match those found at the murder scene, and his shoes didn't match the tread pattern found in Gia's room. In the end, the police concluded that Michael had made up the whole story. It may seem strange, but it's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to high-profile crimes, often to get attention or a reward. It's unclear what motivated Michael, but his confession turned out to be completely false. Following the murder, investigators questioned over 1,000 potential suspects and collected around 400 DNA samples. However, none of them matched the evidence found at the crime scene. In an effort to encourage people to come forward with information, a reward was offered early on in the investigation. As time went on, the reward amount increased each month. By December 2005, a year after the murder, the reward had reached $60,000. The state governor also contributed an additional $20,000 from his own funds, drawing even more public attention to the case. Despite the many leads, all of them ultimately led to dead ends. As a result, the case remained unsolved for several years. In 2007, the victims' parents took action seeking changes in state legislation. They found it surprising that the murderer's fingerprints and DNA were not in any databases, considering the brutality of the crime. The parents refused to believe that this was the perpetrator's first offense. They later discovered that, according to Tennessee laws, fingerprints and DNA samples were only collected from people who had been convicted of a crime. Jason's parents were determined to bring about change. They took an active role in shaping a new law that required the collection of DNA samples from all individuals arrested for violent crimes. The authorities backed this initiative, and the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a significant breakthrough occurred in the case. The police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating his probation terms. Olson had a lengthy criminal record, mainly involving theft, check forgery, and auto theft, with multiple previous arrests. Remarkably, despite his history of run-ins with the law, his fingerprints and DNA had never been collected. Olson lived with his girlfriend and their newborn daughter, but his criminal activities persisted. It was revealed that Olson had already come to the investigators' attention 5 months earlier when they received a tip about his possible involvement in the murder. However, for reasons unknown, the police had not pursued DNA samples for analysis at that time. Nevertheless, with his new arrest for probation violation, they finally decided to question him about Johnia's case. Olson eventually confessed his involvement in the murder and willingly provided a DNA sample. When the lab results came in, it was confirmed that Taylor's DNA was a complete match with the sample found in the victim's apartment. Following this, they collected his fingerprints, which also matched the fingerprint on the murder weapon. Olson was subsequently arrested, and detectives began to question him. Initially, Olson said he was not guilty, but he eventually decided to confess to his actions. Taylor claimed that on that night he had intended to steal Johnia's car and had entered her apartment through the back door to find the car keys. When he entered her room, she woke up and began screaming. In response, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her multiple times. However, he insisted that he hadn't intended to kill anyone, and that it had all occurred accidentally. Detectives had doubts about the truthfulness of some details, and leaned towards believing that Taylor had premeditated the murder. It was possible that he had been stalking the victim for some time, indirectly supported by the fact that Johnia's friends had reported someone following her in a car at the time. No evidence was found to substantiate this, but after Olson's arrest, it seemed increasingly plausible. Despite this, there was little doubt about his culpability, as his DNA and fingerprints were present on the murder weapon, strongly indicating his involvement. Olson's trial was slated to commence in mid-2008, and by that point, he had already retained a lawyer. Apparently, his legal counsel advised him to retract his confession, and Taylor presented a new version of events to the detectives. Now, he claimed that he had entered Johnia's apartment with his friend named Noah Cox. According to this revised account, when Olson entered Gia's room to retrieve the car keys, she allegedly woke up, seized a knife, and stabbed him several times. Olson then fled through the back door, while his friend entered Gia's room, disarmed her, and killed her. This new narrative raised suspicions among the police, as they found no fingerprints or DNA from other individuals at the crime scene, making it appear unlikely that anyone else was involved. Detectives awaited the start of the trial, but it never occurred. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson took his own life in his prison cell. Alongside him, several suicide notes were discovered, addressed to his family, Joan, his relatives, and the police. In the note to the detectives, he once again alleged that his friend Noah Cox was the actual perpetrator, and also apologized to Gia's family and his own. Detectives continued to believe that Olson was responsible for the murder and repeatedly questioned him, but they found no evidence implicating him. Gia's parents also remained skeptical, believing that Olson was lying. In their view, if Taylor was truly innocent, he wouldn't have taken his own life. It seemed more likely that he simply did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison. Furthermore, for several months following his initial confession, Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone and that there was no one else with him. The sudden change in his story to shift blame onto his friend raised further doubts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ada Betty Quadros Fernandez. Ada Quadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimote, Peru, to Victor Quadros, a veterinarian, and El Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law, but unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a US visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazaraick family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys, Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. 4 months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazaraick couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Elisa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was, and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazaraick household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time, and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazaraick family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazaraick family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazaraick's, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazaraick's arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Elisa, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle, while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazaraick returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she'd tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazaraick family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. 2 female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred, and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone, but the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the doorframe when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, she claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical, as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support. After which, Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later, on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was in prison on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compresses and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma, and despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctor suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found a Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Elle Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal. Kyle's parents shared photos and videos of their 14-month-old son, recounting his life from birth to days before his death. Family members spoke, while others cried. Sentenced to life without parole in 2006, Ada's family refused to give up, citing racial prejudice and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually, 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence: testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines, and ultimately being removed from life support, with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Quadros, aged 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team, learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent, and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born in Iowa, USA, on November 13, 1979. He grew up in Cedar Falls, a city that is home to the University of Northern Iowa. As a young boy, Tyler joined the Boy Scouts, where he earned the prestigious rank of Eagle Scout. This experience sparked a lifelong love for nature and camping in him. The camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which promoted family bonding, were particularly enjoyable to him. In his free time, he learned to play the trumpet. Tyler's true passion, however, lay in adventure and sports. He was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team at Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls. He also enjoyed outdoor activities like canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Later, his interest in computing led him to Truman State University in Missouri, where he studied computer science and earned his degree. It was there that he met Sarah, who would later become his wife. Sarah was born on March 27, 1980, in Kansas City. During her childhood, she spent time near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam. Sharing Tyler's passion for the outdoors, Sarah enjoyed bird watching and studying insects. Like Tyler, she was a dedicated Girl Scout and earned the highest honor, the Gold Award. Her adventurous spirit was inherited from her mother, with whom she went on a backpacking trip to Central America. It's no wonder that Tyler knew Sarah was his soulmate when he met her as a student. Sarah excelled academically and demonstrated exceptional leadership skills, particularly in student projects focused on enhancing school life. Her positive leadership and inclination earned her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to Truman State University, where she met Tyler. As they fell deeply in love, she readily accepted his marriage proposal. Both Tyler's and Sarah's families supported their decision to marry, recognizing that they were perfect for each other and destined to build a beautiful family together. On June 22, 2002, guests gathered at St. John Lutheran Church for Tyler and Sarah's wedding. Family members took their seats, while Sarah waited outside with her father. At 22, the couple exchanged vows, promising to stay together until death parted them. They chose Boundary Waters for their 10-day honeymoon, sharing a love for nature. In the initial 10 years of their marriage, Tyler and Sarah prioritized establishing financial security and advancing their professional careers. After completing their undergraduate degrees in Missouri, the couple relocated to Lawrence, where they pursued their master's degrees at the University of Kansas. Sarah eventually worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler held jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, and UPS. He also had a long-term career at a company specializing in business billing and payments, which lasted for 18 years. During this period, the Schmidts' marriage was filled with exciting experiences beyond their professional commitments. The couple made it a point to spend quality time together, exploring new outdoor destinations and engaging in various activities. They regularly socialized with family and friends, bonding over their shared love of board games. Occasionally, they participated in events organized by the Lutheran Church. As enthusiastic fans of the Kansas Jayhawks, they attended basketball tournaments held at the Allen Fieldhouse. The year 2013 was a mix of sadness and happiness for the couple. They suffered a significant loss when Sarah's father passed away from a heart attack, leaving his loved ones in grief. However, 2 years later, in 2015, they experienced the joys of parenthood with the birth of their son, Arlo. In 2018, they welcomed their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, into the world. When Arlo turned 6 and Lula was 3, the family made the decision to move to Cedar Falls to be closer to Tyler's family. The community of Cedar Falls warmly welcomed them, and soon they became active members of it. Tyler continued his work as a software engineer, while Sarah took on a role as an assistant at the city's public library. The children enrolled in the preschool program at Lincoln Elementary School. Tyler and Sarah were renowned for their kind nature and willingness to lend a helping hand, making everyone around them feel valued and important. This dedication earned them the admiration and affection of their neighbors and the entire community. Similarly, at the library, Sarah's warm and friendly personality quickly made her a well-known and appreciated figure, both among her colleagues and the wider community. The couple instilled their passion for outdoor activities and nature in their children, Arlo and Lula. In 2021, they began taking their kids camping, and despite their busy schedules, the children loved these trips so much that the parents made time for them whenever possible. By mid-2022, Sarah's workload had increased significantly. She took a day off in June to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary and planned another day off in July for a family vacation. She had to finish a project for the library by July 26th, but was determined not to let it interfere with the family's plans. During the week of July 11th, Sarah told her brother's wife that she would be taking the kids camping at Makata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, a popular destination known for its 13 impressive caves and stunning natural landscapes. On Thursday, July 21st, the family packed up their car and drove 140 miles to reach Makata Caves. The Schmidt family, Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children, Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. As the camping area was crowded, they set up near the park's entrance. A few hours later, around 7 p.m., another family parked their vehicle about 200 feet from the initial family's tent. This family consisted of Joe and Cecilia Sherwin and their 23-year-old son Anthony, who hailed from Nebraska. The Sherwins proceeded to set up 2 separate tents, one for Joe and Cecilia, and another for their son Anthony. At the time, they were on their way back home following a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that had taken them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. The journey had been an enjoyable experience, and it had brought Joe, Cecilia, and Anthony closer together. Anthony was a devoted son, praised by his mom for his kind and sensitive nature. He was an excellent student and entrepreneur, working on a lucrative business venture that would financially support his parents. Though his mom, Cecilia, didn't know the details, Anthony kept her updated, mentioning only that his project involved secure emails. At Makata Caves, the campers retired to their tents as night fell. However, their peaceful slumber was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. Just prior to the commotion, a man clad in black had entered the Schmidt's tent, attacking Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was awakened by his sister Lula's screams. As he turned, he was met with a horrifying sight: blood inside the tent. Frantic with fear, he managed to escape and ran to seek help. As he fled, he heard one final shot. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Joe, who were camped nearby, rushed out of their tent amidst the chaos. Joe searched frantically for his son among the campers, asking if anyone had seen him. Arlo, still in a state of panic, continued to run until he encountered the sheriffs. He was screaming for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Cecilia grasped his hand and ran with him to the park entrance. Once there, terrified and unsure of what had transpired, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She was beside herself with worry, fearing that her son might be among the victims, since he had been sleeping near the tent where the shots had come from. Cecilia called the Jackson County 911 operator to report hearing gunshots, but she struggled to pronounce the name of the park where she was, making it difficult to convey her location. She explained that she was with a boy who claimed that his parents had been shot. The call between Cecilia and 911 lasted 23 minutes as she answered the operator's questions. The operator relayed the attack to the police and park rangers, but the call was briefly disconnected. Cecilia persisted and called back, only to be put on hold while the dispatcher contacted emergency responders. Despite the tense and nervous atmosphere in the park, Cecilia remained calm thanks to the adrenaline. After providing details about their exact location, she handed the phone to Arlo, the boy. He told the dispatcher that he was in a tent with his mom, sister, and dad, and when he woke up, he saw someone dressed in black holding a gun. When the 911 operator asked the child where his father was, he paused before responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police officers and paramedics arrived at the campsite to find a horrific scene. All occupants of the Schmidt's tent were dead. The once peaceful campsite had become a crime scene. Law enforcement immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could have been anywhere. The tactical teams swiftly evacuated Macoka Cave State Park and Camp Shalom, a nearby Christian summer camp located 1.5 miles from the attack site. As officials evacuated visitors, they gathered them outside the park. Once everyone was accounted for, it was clear that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing, and he was armed. During an aerial search at 11 a.m., police found a body. Upon reaching it, they confirmed it was Anthony, deceased. Although an investigation was necessary, police identified him as the prime suspect in the homicides, believing he had committed the attack on the Schmidts before taking his own life. The authorities closed the park following the incident, a measure that remained in place until July 28th. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered their condolences, with their spokesperson expressing devastation on behalf of the entire team, stating that the event had shaken Iowa's tradition of enjoying its natural wonders. But the legacy would continue for the millions of families who recreate in Iowa's parks. As a mark of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the rest of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other political leaders, including the Iowa governor, who expressed horror at the attack and sorrow for the unimaginable tragedy. A U.S. House representative from Iowa tweeted that it was a senseless and horrific crime. Sarah's family was devastated when they lost her. Her sister was particularly heartbroken, feeling as though her life had been turned upside down. She couldn't accept that Sarah was gone, and that she would no longer be able to pick up the phone and talk to her or watch her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend the private funeral service, which was held at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. Meanwhile, as the loved ones of the Schmidts coped with their grief and tried to console and care for Arlo, the authorities continued their investigation into the brutal crime. According to the Iowa Department of Public Safety's findings, which were based on the autopsy results, Tyler died from a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. Sarah's death was caused by sharp force injuries alone, and their young daughter was both shot and strangled. In early August 2022, authorities officially identified Anthony Sherwin as the person responsible for the murder of the Schmidt family. Sherwin, 23, had no prior criminal record and acted alone before taking his own life, according to the police. The investigation failed to uncover any motive behind the attack. The assistant director of the Division of Criminal Investigation clarified that there was no established connection between Anthony and the Schmidt family prior to the incident, despite them being neighboring campers. The Nebraska Police Department assisted in the investigation by searching the Sherwin family apartment, but found no suicide note or any indication that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. His Facebook page yielded no clues, as it was completely blank. Regarding the weapon used in the attack, the assistant director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation reported that a single hand-assembled firearm was recovered near Anthony's body. This type of weapon, commonly known as a ghost gun, is built by individuals using online purchased parts without restrictions, as they lack serial numbers, making them difficult to regulate and trace. Anthony's parents confirmed that their son had built his own weapon using online instructions. However, they clarified that he did this as a challenge, not because he wanted to own a gun. They emphasized that Anthony was responsible and had never hurt anyone or any animal. The parents, Cecilia and her husband, said their family had never owned guns before. But due to Nebraska's rising crime rates, they decided to acquire some. Because they were new to handling guns, they even took classes to learn how to use them properly. They brought the homemade gun on their trip to protect themselves from crime and possible bear attacks, which they had experienced before while camping. They intended to get rid of the gun later. When they returned home, Anthony's parents were determined to prove their son's innocence. They believed he was a victim of murder, not the killer. According to his mother, an independent autopsy report showed that Anthony had been shot twice, not once, as the police claimed. She was puzzled by how he could have shot himself a second time, which challenged the authorities' suicide theory. They also questioned the description of the clothing the attacker wore. Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker was wearing black, which didn't match what her son had on, green shorts she had given him the day before the tragedy occurred. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe claimed that the police did not reveal where they found Anthony's body, or whether the weapon he supposedly used to take his own life was the same one used in the attack on the Schmidts. Cecilia sent an email to the media outlining her concerns about the investigation into her son Anthony's death. She emphasized that Anthony had too many reasons to live and would not have abandoned everything in such a way. In her opinion, Anthony was incapable of killing and had no connection to the Schmidt family, and they had seen no signs of him planning an attack. When she asked investigators if they had conducted a ballistic test to confirm matches, they did not respond. Similarly, when Anthony's parents requested the final investigation report to commission an independent review, they received no response. In January 2023, a media outlet submitted a request for public records related to the case under Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act. The request included incident reports, investigation documents, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, Devin McClone from the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner responded that the requested records were not public, and the office could only share the immediate facts and circumstances of the case, as provided in the press release links. A few days after the tragedy, a media outlet emailed the official to ask if the weapon Anthony used to take his own life was the same one used in the murders, but she never responded. As it stands, the police believe that Anthony Sherwin was a random killer who brutally murdered 3 beloved members of a Cedar Falls family. However, the family of Cecilia and Joe refuses to accept that their son, who was kind and studious, was involved in the crime. They insist that he was another innocent victim and are determined to prove his innocence. Arlo, the sole survivor of the massacre, was taken in by his aunt and uncle in Cedar Falls. In an interview with a local newspaper, Sarah's brother proudly described his nephew as brave and reported that he was doing well mentally. The GoFundMe page set up after the tragedy continues to receive donations to support Arlo's care and education. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kaylee Mandadi. Kaylee Anita Mandadi was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster to Tak Mandadi and Allison Steele. The family was well off, with Allison being a scientist and Tak working as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Buton, who lived in Houston. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became like a second dad to her. Kaylee was not only a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend, known for her infectious laughter and kind heart that could light up any room. Kaylee excelled academically and was actively involved in various extracurricular activities in school, including horseback riding, piano playing, and theater performances. She was also a dedicated Girl Scout and enjoyed spending time with her friends and family, whether it was hiking with her parents or running around the neighborhood. After graduating with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas, in 2016, Kaylee went on to study communications at Trinity University in San Antonio. With her dark hair and radiant beauty, she quickly became popular among her peers, leading the football team's cheerleading squad and making many friends. Kaylee was always eager to try new and exciting things, from exploring uncharted territories to participating in extreme sports. Her love for animals led her to volunteer with an animal therapy group, where she found joy in helping others. During a football game, Kaylee met Mark Houghton, a 22-year-old athlete and professional baseball player. At first, she didn't notice him as she was already smitten with someone else. However, Mark was immediately captivated by her charisma and striking features, particularly her large black eyes. Mark and Kaylee's first two meetings didn't go smoothly, but Mark didn't give up. By September 2017, they had officially started dating. From the start, their friends and acquaintances thought they were a mismatched pair because they were both emotional and had short tempers. Their relationship was lacking in compromise and was characterized by heated arguments and confrontations from the beginning. The young couple's passion often turned to jealousy, leading to frequent quarrels. Friends who witnessed their relationship reported that Kaylee often had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend shared a particularly disturbing incident in which Kaylee was too afraid to retrieve her phone from Mark and asked the friend to do it for her. Things eventually escalated to a frightening point where Mark became aggressive, threatened violence, and even pulled out a gun. Kaylee was aware that her boyfriend Mark had a jealous temper, and their loud arguments were frequent. Although she never wanted their fights to be public knowledge, she acknowledged that she wasn't blameless in their disputes. However, on September 24, 2017, her roommates intervened, calling the police around 1 a.m. after hearing loud noises and Mark yelling threats from Kaylee's room. When the police arrived, they found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee refused to press charges, downplaying the incident as just a lover's quarrel. Nevertheless, her friends suspected that Mark's anger issues were fueled by substance abuse and reported his violent threats, including an incident where he threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Despite their tumultuous relationship, Mark and Kaylee had moments of deep love and affection. However, their bliss was short-lived, as their argument at the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio on October 29th, triggered by the unexpected appearance of Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, demonstrated. The fight was so intense that they left the festival early. Mark's black Mercedes arrived at a hospital, 6 hours after their friends last saw them. He rushed out of the car, frantically waving and calling for help. In the front seat, medical staff found an unconscious, semi-nude girl. The car was in disarray, with Kaylee's clothes scattered around. She was slumped forward, resembling a lifeless doll. The medical staff rushed Kaylee to the emergency room on a stretcher. Mark told them they had taken illegal substances before attending the festival, which helped doctors treat her for a possible overdose. She was later transferred to a medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specializing in intimate assault cases examined her and found additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee died from blunt force trauma to her face and head, indicating she was a victim of a deadly attack. The police then launched an investigation to find her killer. Mark became the main suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Although there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Mark's behavior during police interviews raised suspicions. He changed his story multiple times, contradicting his initial account. Surveillance footage also showed him and Kaylee at locations he had previously denied being at. Additionally, interviews with Kaylee's friends and family revealed a history of aggressive behavior towards her, with one of her sisters even admitting to being terrified of him. Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, has filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, accusing the institution of failing to protect her daughter from Mark's attacks. The lawsuit, filed in Becker County District Court, also names Mark Houghton as a defendant. It claims that Mark's assault led to Kaylee's death, motivated by jealousy. The lawsuit alleges that Trinity University's staff, administration, and campus police were aware of Mark's erratic behavior during his relationship with Kaylee. Despite this, the university took no action to protect Kaylee in the weeks leading up to her death, even though Mark had threatened to break her face or cause her serious harm. A Trinity University spokesperson declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Mark was banned from campus for a year due to an incident in his dorm room, but he repeatedly violated the ban. During investigations, it was discovered that Mark had a history of violent behavior towards his girlfriend, Kay, including threatening to harm her sisters and others. Her sisters reported that Mark had threatened to throw one sister off a balcony and shoot her ex-boyfriend's brothers. Mark had an arrest warrant issued against him, and he surrendered in February 2018. He faced multiple charges, including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction, but pleaded not guilty. The trial regarding Kaylee Mandadi's death began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark's volatile temper led him to fatally assault Kaylee in a fit of rage, causing her severe injuries. They claimed that Mark then waited 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. Mark's defense team suggested that Kaylee's death might have been caused by factors other than Mark's actions, such as the banned substances found in her system, which could have led to a spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother described her daughter's injuries as extremely severe, comparable to those sustained from a fall from an airplane. The injuries covered her entire body, from her head to her toes, including bruises, red marks, and scratches. The only areas that were not injured were her back and the back of her legs. Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who performed Kaylee's autopsy, presented graphic evidence, including photographs of the victim's injuries. These images revealed a subdural hematoma, a type of bleeding in the brain typically associated with traumatic brain injury, on the right side of Kaylee's brain. Dr. Dana testified that Kaylee suffered severe cranial and facial injuries, including a dent in her skull and extensive bruising and trauma to her face. She also found bruises on Kaylee's eyelids, jaws, mouth, gums, lips, and cheeks, as well as hemorrhages in both eyes. Dr. William Anderson disagreed with Dr. Dana's conclusion, stating that the autopsy results were inconsistent with the idea that Kaylee was attacked. Instead, he believed that Kaylee's injuries were more likely caused by a fall and subsequent medical treatment. Defense attorney John Hunter argued that the prosecution lacked concrete evidence to explain what happened to Kaylee on the night in question, and that it was impossible to prove Mark's involvement. He highlighted Kaylee's history of drug use, including her prior treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor, testified that Kaylee's blood contained a high level of MDMA, also known as ecstasy or Mollie, on the evening of October 29, 2017. The concentration of MDMA in her blood suggested that she could have suffered a minor head injury, which could then be exacerbated by the drug into a life-threatening condition. John Hunter suggested that a drug can affect individuals differently, leading to varying physical reactions, such as increased body temperature or electrolyte imbalance, which can cause loss of consciousness. During the trial, Mark Houghton testified that he and Kaylee Mandadi had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out. He claimed that their intimacy was consensual and involved rough sex, which included strangling her at her request. However, the origin of the bruises on Kaylee's body remained unclear. Kaylee's mother, Allison, was convinced that Mark Houghton was responsible for her daughter's death. Despite being charged with her murder, Mark Houghton maintained his innocence during the 2019 trial. The defense argued that Kaylee's injuries were caused by hospital staff during resuscitation efforts, which led to a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a verdict. The case was presided over by Judge Raymond Angeline in the 144th District Court. Following the mistrial, Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez expressed disappointment and announced that he would review the case. Kaylee's parents decided to conduct their own investigation, focusing on a small bruise near Kaylee's ear. They believed that Mark Houghton might have hit her head against the car window, causing the bruise. Kaylee's parents collected evidence, including autopsy reports and photos, and obtained 3 affidavits under oath. This led to Mark Houghton's arrest on charges of aggravated intimate assault and criminal mischief. The timeline of events presented in the investigation highlighted Mark Houghton's alleged lies and the evidence that led to his arrest. During the trial, prosecutors portrayed Mark Houghton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away. 2 weeks before her death, Mark Houghton pushed Kaylee against a brick wall and trashed her dorm room. Kaylee then asked for space, and Mark Houghton began sending her dozens of messages, threatening to end his life. The couple attended a festival where they argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend. Mark Houghton then took Kaylee to a deserted parking lot, where they stayed for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there that Mark Houghton attacked and killed Kaylee. Kaylee's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their work in bringing criminal charges against Mark Houghton. The prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee's parents, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications. Mark Houghton was convicted of aggravated assault, causing harm that led to the death of Kaylee Mandadi. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with a $110,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee's family. He was also barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Now over 30 years old, Mark is serving his sentence in Wilkes County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. Although the conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, they felt the sentence was not enough for their loss. In the second trial, Mark faced additional charges, including aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution presented a more comprehensive case against Mark, but the family was still dissatisfied with the outcome and sought a retrial. Kaylee's tragic story highlights the devastating impact of violence on young people and her family's quest for justice. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family felt that the verdict did not serve justice for their daughter. In 2019, Kaylee's mother, Allison Steele, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She also founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Additionally, She established a non-profit organization dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In 2021, Allison filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University, alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. She claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Houghton had trashed her dorm room, giving him continuous access to her and making her vulnerable to manipulation. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, Mark was found guilty of aggravated assault, causing bodily harm. The family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, feeling relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee's parents had to endure. Allison said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee, and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter.